But today we're having somebody that's running for the House of Delegates. It's District 89 in Virginia. Again, she is a millennial, 26 years old. We're happy to have her on. This is Hannah Kinder. The seat is somewhat of a weird open seat, but the person that already has the seat may still be able to get in. If Hannah, once she gets into the interview, she can kind of explain it. It's a little strange, but Hannah Kinder, again, running for Virginia House of Delegates, District 89. Hannah, thanks so much for coming on. We really are happy to have you today.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to talk to you and to talk to all the listeners and viewers.
Can you kind of explain all this odds and ends of this seat right now?
Sure. So yes, this race is really strange. And just to kind of preface this for folks listening and watching that don't live in Virginia or maybe don't really pay attention to Virginia politics, we're the first state that I know of that is going to host these big elections, like the governor elections, these statewide elections, post Trump and also post the census being done. Most other states are trying to finish their redistricting. So I know like New Jersey was one of the states I saw as an example, was moving their elections to 2022 to hold off until they can get their census and their redistricting all figured out. We're not doing that. So Virginia is just kind of letting us run loose. There has been some conversation about if we go through the November elections and then they finish the census and the redistricting, and if it affects districts a lot, that they might make people rerun, which seems really chaotic. That being said, yes, for the question about who can sit on which ballots, we have a lot of current delegates and state senators who are running for these statewide offices, which would be governor, like Lee Carter. He falls in that category as a delegate running for statewide, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, which is where Jay Jones is running as well. The question is from the State Board of Elections, which is unclear and has not been publicly cleared up to my knowledge, is if they can sit on both ballots or if they have to pick one or the other. My understanding is they have to pick one or the other. And let's say Jay goes for it. He wants to run for attorney general. He goes up against Herring and he loses. He cannot default to delegate. So he wouldn't even be showing up on the primary ballot unless he drops officially off of attorney general. That's my understanding. But our early voting starts in about a couple, 20 something days. So they have to start figuring that out.
So can you tell the viewers, Hannah, why you would want to, as a 26-year-old woman, run for office, get into this cesspool of politics in Virginia, of politics in general is a total cesspool, whether it's the Democrats or the Republican Party?
It really is. And that's something I was hyper aware of, and I'm now even more aware of now that I'm in it. I'd say I'm in it on the fringe. I'm not a politician. I have no political connections, and but something that someone told me when I went up to their door, I was trying to gather my petitions to get on the ballot. She told me, "I love that you're young because you are not owned by anyone and you owe nobody anything." And I think that gave me a lot more confidence. Is like people see that. They see that people have accepted money, they've accepted, favors, they've made buddies with, if they're lawyers or whoever they might be. They have these connections and they have these unspoken, little like elbow rubs that they're going to do to help out their friends. And I don't fall in that category. I am a working class, younger person. I've never been invited to a political fundraiser. I'm not someone that they're going after, and so I think there's a lot of other people in my position or in my, I guess, same like demographics. Agreed. That are also running for offices, and I appreciate them. And I am so happy that there seems to be a large class of us running at the same time because it brings fresh perspective. And Virginia is one of 5 states with virtually no campaign finance laws. So I think that's important as well. The fact that we are running and taking a stance on not taking that corporate yucky money. And also we don't know anyone either that we would be voting for whether or not they give us money just to like boost up our buddies. But the reason why I'm running is kind of multifaceted, but the biggest one, I call it my literal trigger moment. In 2019, I started teaching alongside working at my nonprofit job. And in December, I had a student have a gun go off in my classroom. And then a month later, I walked into an email that another student had been shot and killed over the weekend. And then a month or 2 later after that, we got put into COVID lockdown. And so through processing what had happened and really becoming very keenly aware of what's going on in my community and seeing that most of my elected officials are completely, while they might outwardly say, we're, pro gun control or gun reform, or we understand what it's like to, have someone die from gun violence. Most of them are very wealthy. They're very politically connected, and they're not enduring the same situations that myself and my neighbors have gone through. Most of Norfolk lives in poverty. Most of Norfolk is young and Black, so that already puts them at a political disadvantage, I guess you could say. It's really disgusting. And on top of that, in the last election round in November, which after that election, I decided I was going to run. That was kind of how it all came together for me. We had a vote no, vote yes casino thing on our ballot where they were trying to build a casino in downtown Norfolk on a brownwater site, which means before they can even build, they're going to have to do millions of dollars of work to even get that location up to par environmentally to build. And our current delegate, Jay, he not only took over $10,000 from the casino and gaming industry, he was also the counsel for the Vote Yes PAC that was proponent of getting that passed. Now, arguably, the tax dollars that come from it, it's up for debate on what that really will look like whenever it's finally built millions of dollars later. But the fact that we have so many people that are living below the poverty line, who are also young, mostly working class, and also have the largest Navy base in the world. So now you're putting, young men and women and people who have all of this money and freedom all of a sudden, and they're in a new place. You take all of that and dump it around a casino. That just sounds like a recipe for disaster for me. And so just seeing all of these issues kind of swirling around, I decided I had to do more. Teaching, unfortunately, didn't work out for me. I recognized, the gun trauma was more, it was affecting the students because I wasn't who I needed to be for them. So teaching didn't work out. And with nonprofits, you advocate and do as much work as you can, but being the person actually signing and writing the bills seems a lot more powerful. And that was kind of how I decided to put my finger in and let's see if I can get it.
Going door to door, talking to people on these Zoom interviews, doing these fundraisers online. What are the people telling you besides this eviction issue about the big hot issues in the district of the 89th district, I should say, which includes Norfolk, of course?
Sure. The biggest one I continue to hear is that people want their voting rights back. I have a lot of people who have previously been incarcerated. That's very important. They want to be able to vote. They want to have that voice. That's something that's very important to them. They're getting that now, which is exciting. The governor recently gave voting rights back to 69,000 previous felons. So that's wonderful. The other thing is minimum wage. So this one's a little weird. Virginia did pass raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, but it's incremental year to year, building up until I think it might be 2024 as well, when the marijuana legalization starts. So they did that to help the smaller businesses who maybe are afraid of not being able to, pay their people what they deserve to be paid. But at the same time, that doesn't really help people who need the money now, who can't pay their bills. But something I love about Norfolk is when you outwardly, it is a completely underserved community. I mean, there is rampant gentrification, rampant segregation. I mean, it's awful. And yet the people are so they're just so in love with like their life. You know, I ask them, what do you need? What can I do? What can I put in my campaign that will help you? And they say, I'm good. I'm good. You know, and so they've come together as a community so deeply, and I love that. I love the people of Norfolk, but I want to do something to help them. So I wish that they would tell me a little bit more, but what I continue to hear is voting rights being restored as well as minimum wage.
Do you feel like people saying that they're good is that a lot of these people are hopeless with the system that we have, that they keep voting in these people? And this is going to go into, and I'll ask the question now since we're going into it. We hear all these people tout the word progressive now. Everybody's a progressive. Joe Biden's a progressive. Barack Obama's progressive. Hillary Clinton's progressive. Joe Manchin is progressive. Everybody's a progressive now. So the definition for progressive is just so watered down to what a progressive really should be, that it's basically everybody can be a progressive.
Yeah, and that's hilarious to me, because what's funny is the people who originally ran as progressives, right? Like Ilhan Omar, AOC, Cori Bush, they either didn't win their first time around, or they did and were hung up on a cross just to be the battering ram for the entire Democratic Party. And yet people are so desperate to want to be called that, because they know that that's what people want. And it crosses the aisle. I mean, it really does. When you talk about giving people their voting rights back, when you talk about minimum wage, when you talk about, or I should say a living wage, giving them a living ethical wage, giving people safe air to breathe and water to drink and Medicare for all. I mean, those should not be progressive policies, and yet they are. And so I think what it comes down to me, when you actually look at the candidate themselves and what they're doing versus their platform or their campaign, because obviously we know that changes often once they get in office, is where their money is coming from. I think that is really what it comes down to. And it doesn't sound as like, you know, showy as the typical like progressive platform, but if you're taking money from corporations or from super wealthy donors, I don't see how you can possibly vote on progressive policies when they actually land on your desk. And to me, that's the difference, right? Like my platform itself, my campaign messaging is incredibly progressive, but comparing that to other people who might say the same thing and yet take money from Dominion Energy or take money from billionaire donors, I'm not doing that. And so that for me is where I draw the line. But in theory, what a progressive should be is someone who is there for the voters. And that's something else that's really important to me as well. I'm here because I understand that this position represents the people who live in my community. It's not for myself. It's not for my professional or political career or gain. It is to make sure that the voices and the needs of my community are being heard when, you know, I or whoever is elected makes their way to that state house in Richmond. And that's what's most important to me. And I think that gets lost along the way with both parties. I think people forget what they're actually supposed to be doing.
It was two traumatic experiences. Well, first of all, the one that you had at Appalachian State University, but also the one in the high school, which you kind of touched on a little bit earlier on, and how that really changed your outlook on guns in general.
Sure. Yeah. So the first one, sorry, that might have been unclear in my story. It was at Virginia Western Community College.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. It was before I transferred over. No, totally fine. So before I transferred out to university, I went to community college, which if you live in Virginia, please do that. It saves you so much money. You can go to any school you want. Please do that. But I was there. I was in the brand new, beautiful biology lab, which was all an entirely glass building. And we were all of a sudden put on lockdown. And no one really knew what was going on. So we pulled, we had like mini blinds covering the glass wall. that led into the hallway. So we're pulling the blinds down, all the lights are out, and I start getting text messages because people are like, oh my God, are you at school? What's going on? And my teacher, we hear over the intercom that there is someone that has said they're coming to that building with the intent to, have a mass shooting incident. And that was basically all we knew. So we sat there for close to 3 hours and had to be so silent, couldn't move, couldn't even like text my mom or look at my phone because, you're in a fishbowl basically with someone coming with a gun, like, what are you going to do? You can't have your phone on. So you sit and you just listen to every little noise. And luckily, the person was apprehended, nothing happened, but the feeling of sitting in there for hours and just listening to every noise, trying to figure out, like, is that person walking? Is it security? Is it, what's going on? Layering on top of that you're sitting in a glass room and there's really nothing that you can do to keep yourself safe. That's a really traumatizing feeling. And even though nothing happened for years after that, I would have panic attacks, even going into the grocery store or Target, any type of big space. I felt very vulnerable and I felt very uncomfortable, and it would take me like upwards of 30 minutes to get out of my car and walk into the store because I could not mentally bring myself to go in there. And of course, this is at the height of, mass shootings starting to happen. And Virginia Western is in Roanoke, Virginia, which is 45 minutes from Blacksburg. I was, living there when the tech shooting happened. So that was already a very sensitive situation in that area. I went on to college. I moved to Norfolk. Norfolk has a really bad gun problem. And I was aware of that. Many nights you fall asleep hearing gunshots. That's completely normal. People joke about it. They'll message. We have like a neighborhood Facebook group or whatever, and people will be like, did anyone hear that? And people are like, oh, it's probably just fireworks, or just pretend it's fireworks, whatever. But everyone knows what it is. And we have people die all the time. And so I started teaching in 2019. In December of 2019, I had a student have a gun go off in my classroom. The story is a little graphically written on my website. I had a writer write it for me, but he had it in his pocket somehow. I don't know if he was like pushing it, I don't know what happened, but it went off, it hit him. I was helping another student, and all of a sudden, I don't remember hearing it go off, but my ears started ringing and my vision was blurry, and I looked up and there was just blood all over the wall, dripping on the floor. And I didn't see that first. We locked eyes first, myself and the student, and it was just pure terror. And then when I kind of refocused and my ears stopped ringing, that's when I saw, the chaos of what was going on. That was very traumatic. And then a month later, I walk into school and I have an email that another one of my students had been shot and killed over the weekend. And that day was really hard because not only was I dealing with still, a month later, the trauma of what had happened in the classroom, I also taught his girlfriend and his sister. And so I'm seeing the ripple effect of this happening, and the district level, she's like the head of all the counselors. She came to my classroom personally to talk to me because they realized I was the same teacher from December that had that situation happen. And those issues, they don't leave you. Those stories never leave you. And I'm blessed that no one died. And I'm thankful that it wasn't what it could have been. It was an accidental gun going off. It wasn't like a mass shooting situation in my classroom, but the trauma of that doesn't leave. And I saw it affect other students as well. The student that was sitting next to him, completely, not involved with what was going on at all. She lost a lot of weight. She cut all her hair off. She was really going through mental crisis at the age of 15. And that's something that's really horrific. But what was worse for me was knowing that that student who had the gun just ruined a lot of his life. He got expelled from school. He's probably going to fall deeper into gang activity because he now doesn't have an education to stand on. And to see other students who I know were from, I guess I should say this to preface, the school I taught in is in a very weird neighborhood. Part of the neighborhood, or part of the area that the students come from, are the wealthiest parts of Norfolk overall. The other is the poorest, and they're all in the same school. And it really is like segregated schools. Like they don't even look at it like people, you can tell like the kids from the higher income areas are in the AP classes, you know, they don't mix. And that's very much, you know, an educational issue, which is something that I've woven into my campaign as well, is addressing those educational disparities between economic classes.
I'll tell you how to get rid of gun violence is if you make good wages, $15 or higher, create good jobs, get people health care. That'll curb a lot of gun violence. It'll go down really fast.
Yeah, you give people the resources, they won't commit crime. I mean, people commit crime because their needs aren't being met. So
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's common knowledge. I mean, people go to gangs because their families are broken down. Why are most of their families broken down? Because they don't have jobs, because they don't have affordable housing. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this stuff. You could be as dumb as a rock and come to that conclusion. And we'll move on to the audience questions here. Hannah, I thank you for your time here. Quick answers, because we've been talking for a while. I love this. I love talking to you. I appreciate it. It's nice to talk to a fellow progressive.
Yes.
With that said, can you tell us quickly, as far as these audience questions, what is your opinion on the Biden administration so far?
I'd say I'm underwhelmed, but I'm not surprised at the lack of action. But I do love HR1. So I can't really tie that to him, but I appreciate that our country has moved to a place that at least something like that is on the table. I think that's important. I think it's the same old story. You know, a lot of promises were made to campaign, to run on a progressive agenda. And once you get in, you abandon the progressive wagon and jump ship. And I'm very disappointed in that.
But being in the vegan lifestyle, working with PETA, can you tell the viewers about what you've done with PETA and also, you know, about your vegan lifestyle too, please?
Sure. So I first went vegan my sophomore year of college. It's been like 7 or 8 years. And almost immediately I was obviously trying to learn, you know, as much as I could. And so at the time, there was this group called PETA 2, which was the youth division of what we called Big PETA. And PETA 2 was targeted at upper high school and college age students, and they provided, you know, blog posts and articles that would help you understand issues and understand, you know, what's going on in the AR world. And part of that was also like a stipend position where you could do activism on your campus and you would get paid a stipend every semester. And so I leaned into that pretty hard because that was what I was trying to learn from. I was trying to understand, you know, this new life that I have found. And I originally went vegan for the environment. That was what piqued my interest. But then after I learned about like the truth of like how animals are treated and the health, I switched overnight my diet, but I had been researching for several months about the environmental issues. And so I did the PETA 2 work for several years through college and had some pretty good successes at my school. I was able to get a dissection choice policy put in place within the biology department, which was my own department, so that students had an alternative option and that it was made very clear that they did have an option. So that was great. I felt good about that. I helped get some more plant-based, environmentally friendly foods put on the lunch menu or on the campus dining menu. And when I went to graduate, I was actually offered a position with PETA 2 basically the staff side of what I had been doing in college. So rather than being the student doing the activism, I was the staff member guiding them and offering them, you know, materials and resources and helping them strategize their campaign. I did that for a couple of years, and the longer I was there, the more disillusioned I became with the organization, and that's probably a whole other topic. And right about the time that I was honestly getting very depressed and burnt out, because I saw the work I was doing as being something productive, but I was doing it on behalf of an organization that ethically I no longer aligned with. And so basically, it was really serendipitous. A really good friend of mine was working for the organization I work for now, which is Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. And they had just created this new position there, which was working on institutional campaigns. And she called me. She was like, "You would be perfect for this job. You have to apply." So I applied, I got it, I moved over. It's been almost 3 years. I love working there. Ethically, I align very, you know, I am so happy. We have very strong standholds on, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion. We have active anti-racist work within our organization. We're paid to do like team learning, where we bring people in from other communities, other organizations, other fields, and we learn from them and we talk and engage with them. And I think that that's really valuable, especially for the work that we're doing. And it does very much, you know, drive my campaign as well. Everything that I've run on is rooted in compassion, and that really does come from the way I live my life. I have compassion for the animals. I have compassion for the environment. I have compassion for the workers who have to work in these environments, the people who live around these facilities, and that compassion ultimately, obviously, extends into every aspect of my life.
How do you change people's appetites from eating stuff like ham, hamburgers, and all the rest of this stuff? I know they're talking about like Burger King has the Impossible Burger. Now I hear that there's stuff like GMOs in that, and obviously those are not great for you to put in your body. But how are you changing people's diets and, you know, as far as eating all this junk and all this antibiotics that are pumped into these animals, which, you know, we should be saving these animals. You know, the cows, we don't do, you know, people don't just eat hamburger from the cow, they get milk from the cow. So, I mean, these are sacred animals that we need to save, that, you know, do a lot for our environment in general. So with that, you know, how would you change people's diets?
Yeah, so the thing I really love about where I work now, and as I had talked about earlier, my increasing disillusion with my previous employer, with PETA, is our approach is not everyone has to be vegan. I mean, I think that that's really illogical, honestly. And that's something that I really believe and is something I appreciate with the approach of my employer as well. So we don't even ever use the word vegan in our materials, in our website. Like it's you won't find it. If you did, it might just be like, you know, a whoopsie. But we really advocate for incremental change. So maybe you don't go vegan, that's fine. Maybe you don't even go vegetarian, but cut out, you know, maybe you have a vegan day, or what I like to say is plant forward day. So maybe you're just really conscious about the fact that I'm not going to eat this today. And if you mess up, that's okay. But the equivalent of not eating meat for 1 day a week is the same as like not showering for 6 months or something. Like there's huge impacts we can have without changing your whole life. The other piece that we like to talk about, and that I think is important when I'm talking to like friends and family, is some of those other alternative products, right? They're meant to help us shift. But over time, you know, your taste buds change, the things you crave change. And, you know, I'm from an Italian family. Meat and cheese is everything. When I told them I was going vegan, my mom was like, "Oh, what are you thinking? What are you doing?" But through time, you know, at first the cheese thing was really hard. I really craved cheese for about 6 months, I think. And so those plant-based options for cheese, while they weren't identical, mentally, I could be like, okay, this is like cheese, right? And through time, I don't really crave it as much. I don't ever crave it. Now when I smell it, I'm like, oh. like, don't think it's not, like, my whole body has changed, but I was very gracious with myself. And I try to remind people of that, right? Like, vegan alternatives are helpful in that transition phase, but I don't know if they ever will completely replace it. And that's fine. You know, I see them as like their own product. So I see vegan cheese as vegan cheese, and I appreciate it for what it is. I never expect for it to be exactly the same as what cheese is, because it's not. It's a different thing, and appreciating it as that is helpful. The other piece, which isn't, I mean, it's arguable if it's vegan or not, is like the cultured meat situation. So lab growing, you know, a steak in a lab versus going out and killing an animal for it. I think that's really moving towards like what we'll need in the future, even just to feed how many people we're going to have in the next 10 years on this planet. We don't have the space to feed ourselves anymore. If we add 10 billion more people, we're just not going to have the space. So I think those kind of conversations are really important. And that's where I see the help of the government is funding those kind of projects and starting to normalize that within our consumer culture. Is, you know, lab grown meat is meat. It's just, it doesn't come, you don't slaughter something and you don't use the land and the resources to get it. You just take a little cell sample culture and grow it. And there's already some of those products on the market, which is great if you're interested. There's a company called Perfect Day, and they created like whey protein in a lab. So it's molecularly, it is whey, but it never came from an animal ever. And what they do is they sell it out to other companies. So there's a ice cream company called Brave Robot who has made animal, it is milk, but it's vegan because it never came from a cow. It's a created molecule. But it does say, if you have a lactose intolerance, if you have an allergy, do not eat this, because it is milk. So things like that, I think, are awesome. And I'm excited to see the future of it. Whether or not I'd eat it is up for debate. I don't really know. I tried Brave Robot. But I think that's important.
I agree
those
with you.
Other options.
As we wind down with the last three questions, Hannah, can you talk to the viewers about Dominion Energy? We've seen the lock that Dominion Energy has had on building pipelines in impoverished areas underground, you know, making people move out of their houses. Goes into the environmental racism that's going on all over the country, but especially in Virginia through Dominion Energy. So how would you tackle Dominion Energy if you get into power?
So the first thing I've already done, I've signed 5 different campaign finance pledges, 4 of which I believe are specific about not taking money from Dominion. That's very important to me. I know more than a handful. I know a bunch of other candidates who have done the same. That's very important to them as well. I think that's the first place we start, because what seems completely asinine to me is that the people who vote on campaign finance laws are people who are already in office, who benefit from not having real campaign finance laws. So this past session, there was a bill that came out that was to rein in the power of Dominion with giving them caps on how much they could give to elected officials and candidates. And it didn't pass in a Democratic legislature, because so many of these people take their money. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And because money runs politics, you have to have money to win an office. They're not gonna turn away one of their biggest donors. So I think that's the first thing, is electing candidates who have said, I will not take this money, because the more candidates we get in office who aren't tied to them, the more people we have voting for those laws those bills when they come up, to rein them down and take away some of their power. So I think that's the first important step. But of course, once in office, should I win, hopefully I'll win, then we can actually get some of that movement, that progression forward. The other piece of that is voter movement, right? Getting them vocal and calling their legislator and demanding that they either get rid of the money that they took from Dominion, or when that bill comes to their desk again, that they do vote for it, and they do give them some more finance regulations, because I think that that's incredibly important. And Jay, for his attorney general race, he has not taken any of their money. He's very vocal about not taking their money. However, his delegate account did take money, still has that money. It was not refunded. Also took coal and oil money as well, and pharmaceuticals, and none of them have been returned. So his AG one is running on a good governance campaign finance policy. However, his delegate campaign did not return that money. And most of that money has been funneled to his attorney general committee. So just for anyone who pays attention to that kind of stuff, that money is being used in some capacity.
With the last question, we see a lot of young people that are progressives, such as Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren supporters, and a lot of other progressive candidates, such as AOC, that people that like them, they're really down on the process. We saw no Medicare for all, and we're not going to see it with Joe Biden or with the Democratic Congress. We have not seen a $15 minimum wage. We talked a little bit about that and the death that had in the U.S. House and the Senate too. But with that said, what advice would you give to people that are progressive, such as yourself, that went through all these losses in 2020 and is still going on in 2021, to stick with it and maybe keep standing up? I don't know. You have any advice for these progressives that are really down on their luck because of these policies not passing?
Yeah, I would say this is something that I've really held on to before deciding to run and while running, is your local elections really matter. Bills and legislation move so much faster at the state and local level than it does at the federal level. And when we're talking about federal politics, that's like big money, right? That takes like millions of dollars to get elected. I mean, no matter how progressive you are, the chances of a real progressive getting into congressional office at this point are really slim to none, unless you're super charismatic, right? Like you're an AOC or a Cori Bush. But once they get there, I think that's where the disillusionment happens, because the rest of Congress, it's really hard to get them to flip. But with your state and your local elections, the bills move faster, right? Like Virginia, we had bills come up this year for marijuana legislation, for minimum wage, for, all these things, and they happened quickly, right? Whether or not they're perfect is arguable, but that we had them. And so when you can get it secured in your state, I think that that's really important for getting immediate access and support for people. Once more states get them, I think politicians at the federal level will see that this is something viable. This is something people want because it is passing at the state level. So maybe then we can have the conversation at the federal level. So if you feel disillusioned, I felt very disillusioned and frustrated. Find local candidates, or maybe not even in your state, or maybe not your district, but within your state, that you really get behind and you really support. Help them get into office. And something I've said a lot and has also been told, to me, Virginia oftentimes serves as the catalyst for policy for the rest of the South, right? Once Virginia passes a more progressive law, oftentimes we see it kind of ripple down through the rest of the southern states. So even if you don't live in a state like maybe you live in Louisiana or Mississippi, where things just, there's not much good going on, find candidates in other states that you really support and get behind them, because the more other states start doing these kind of bills, and the more progressive states do things well, other states are going to follow suit because the people will demand it. So find ways that you can get active and find ways you can support people. If there's not anyone in your district and you don't feel like you're ready to run for office, that's okay. Find someone else that you can get behind, but do everything you can. And as a progressive, what I think a true progressive candidate, find those progressives, because they do need the support, right? We're going up against the big dogs, the old guard, the people with all the money and political affiliations. We come in as nobodies, and any support helps. And what I love about progressive candidates is every dollar means so much. Like, I got my first dollar donation and I literally danced around my house. I was so excited. I can't say the same for more establishment Dems who get money just funneled down their throats. It means a lot more to those grassroots activists that go in to run for office and really want to make a difference.
Kinderfornorfolk.com, KINDERFORNORFOLK.com. Definitely check her out. Hannah, what else can people do? Obviously, donate. Is there any way they can volunteer, even if they don't live in Virginia? Help online, maybe? I don't know.
Yes, there's a volunteer sign up form on the website. Please volunteer. Again, since everything's fairly virtual right now, there's a lot of space for people to help with the campaign virtually. I have a person who volunteers from Texas, which is cool.
Wow.
So yes, donations, volunteering, even things as simple as getting on our social pages and liking things, sharing things. The more we can get visibility, the more other people see it, and that's really helpful. And also sharing the campaign with people who also would support and get behind us, especially if they live in Virginia. This is really important. There's a lot of fellow candidates out there in Virginia and around the country right now that are true progressives, that are real people, and they really just want to support you. And I think that, find those people, whether it's me or someone else, and get out there and support them.
Well, Hannah, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.